Hi everybody and welcome to Mindset Learn Extra Exam Revision. Today we're going to be looking at what you need to know to do well in Geography Paper 1 and 2. And we're very pleased to be joined in the studio by Portia January from the Gauteng Department of Education. Welcome to you, Portia.
Thank you, Dylan. I'm glad to be here and to be able to help the geography learners all over the country.
Great to have you. Let's start out with Paper 1. Tell us a little bit about the topics, the content that learners can expect to find in Geography Paper 1.
There's 4 topics that learners must do throughout the year in their grade 12 year. It is climate and weather, it is fluvial processes, people and places, and people and their needs.
Okay. And then just tell us a little bit about the structure of Paper 1. How many marks? How long do learners have to write it? What can they expect when they actually sit down to write this exam?
Okay, it's a 3-hour question paper. And it's out of 300 marks.
Right.
It consists of 4 questions. And the first 2 questions is section A. The second 2 questions is section B.
Right.
Section A consists of 2 of the topics. It is climate and weather,
Yes.
and fluvial processes. Section B consists of question 3 and 4. That is people and places and people and needs. So learners must answer 3 questions out
Right.
of the 4 questions.
Now, a 100-mark question is a pretty big question. It sounds intimidating.
Yeah.
How are those 100 marks broken up for each question?
Okay, if you take question 1 as an example, the first 20 marks will be short questions. Now, as I said in the beginning, it's 2 sections, 2 topics examined there. It is climate and weather and fluvial processes. So that 20 marks, short questions, 10 will be allocated to climate and weather and 10 will be allocated to fluvial processes. Then the 80 remaining questions will be different types of questions, like they must interpret questions. There's essay, or what we call the paragraph question. There's 2 paragraph questions in each of these main questions, in each of question 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that means if the learner answers 3 of these questions, then it's altogether, it's 6 paragraph questions that they must answer.
Right.
And that amounts to about 72 marks. So learners must prepare very well for those questions.
Now, I imagine that writing a 300-mark exam paper in 3 hours, learners need to be really careful about their time management.
Yes, time management is very, very important, Dylan. If they receive the question paper, my advice to them, if they receive the question paper, they must use at least 10 minutes to read through the question and familiarize themselves with these questions, and then after that they can start to choose their questions, and then after that they can start with a question.
Right.
If they allocate at least 55 minutes per question, they will be able to answer the 3 questions in 3 hours.
Great.
If I can just add this, the minute they must check their time continuously. If they reached an hour at least and they're not finished with the question, they must immediately move over to the next question.
That's good
Otherwise, they
advice.
won't be finishing the question paper.
Let's spend a little bit of time now just looking at Paper 2. What's Paper 2 about?
Okay, Dylan, paper 2 is the map work paper. It's a 1.5-hour paper and it's 100 marks. So it's 100 marks for 1.5 hours. There the learners must do, it's a map work skills paper. It consists of map work, calculations, map work interpretation, and then geographical information systems.
Okay. And what's the structure of that paper? Are there short answer questions? Just tell us a little bit about that structure.
Yeah, it's mostly short answer questions, but they have longish questions also. There's questions that out of 2 marks, out of 4 marks, out of 6 marks. And it's like, for instance, if we take the first section, it's 4 sections there. I can give you the 4 sections here. The first 20 marks is multiple choice questions. The second 20 marks is for calculations. What my advice there to learners is to make sure that they know how to do these calculations. They can expect any of the calculations. And learners normally don't do very well in the calculation section. The next 40 marks is for map work interpretation. There it is where they apply the theory that they learned to map work.
A real live map.
Yeah, a real live map. It's a 1:50,000 map,
Right.
scale map, and they they must apply. For instance, they must, if we take in which direction is the river flowing.
Yeah.
All the skills that they've learned, they must apply there.
Okay.
On the map. Okay? And then we have 20 marks for geographical information systems that we also refer to as GIS.
And is there any choice, or do learners have to do all questions?
No, there's no choice here. Learners must do all the questions here.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And then just tell us a little bit about what advice you would give to learners who need to start preparing to write geography at the end of the year. What should they be looking out for? What should they be focusing on? Just a little bit of advice in that area.
By now, most of the learners should be about 80% finished with the syllabus.
Okay.
Okay? So what I would advise learners to do, they just wrote the June exam.
Mm-hmm.
What they should do, they must start to work through old question papers. The question papers that they wrote for the June exam, they can work through the old prelim papers, and then they can work through supplementary papers and final exam papers. And my advice there also would be if they can work through all the NCS papers. I think there's about 7 papers have been written so far, 7 to 8 papers have been written so far since 2008.
Okay. And so that's the best thing for learners to do, is just to go through as many questions as they can?
Firstly, they must study and know the content.
Okay.
They must know the content very well, and then they must work through the question papers. If we look at some of the learners last year that they interviewed that had distinctions, many of those learners answered that they worked through old question papers, a lot of old question papers. That's the only way that they can prepare themselves well. Because the teacher can teach the content,
yeah,
but that content must be applied.
Right, right. And would you advise that learners study alone or study in groups or do a little bit of both?
Yeah, I would. It would be good to do a little bit of both, but especially by the mapwork paper, paper 2, there I would advise them to work in groups, because there they can assist each other, especially with the mapwork interpretation questions.
Great. And then on the day of the final geography papers, what advice can you give to learners to help them cope with what I imagine is a very stressful situation?
Okay, on the day of the exams, firstly, they must not study late the night before.
Okay.
In fact, they can't study still the night before. So on the day of the exam, firstly, they must make sure that they have a good alarm that will wake them up. Because I know about many learners that did not wake up for the exam in time. And then they must have something to eat in the morning, because it helps with the nervousness also. Mm-hmm. What they can do when they receive the paper, my first advice would be to read through the question paper.
Are they given special reading time in the exam?
In certain cases, I know in the exam rooms where they give them time to read, at least 10 minutes to read the paper. Okay. Because we cannot expect a learner to receive the question paper and immediately start to write. So if the first 10 minutes is reading time, then they can read through the question paper and they can make their choice. They can make informed choices there. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then there's a geography question paper. The theory paper consists of the question paper.
That's paper 1, huh?
Yeah, paper 1. Mm-hmm. Of the question paper and the addendum. The addendum, there we find all our diagrams and all the newspaper articles, cartoons, everything that is needed to answer the questions.
So you need to make sure that you've got both.
They must have both. Mm-hmm. They must have both. But what many learners do, they read the question and they try to answer the question and don't refer to the diagrams. And many times, some of the answers they will find on the diagram, or many clues they will find on the diagram.
And what kind of stationery do learners need to have to write geography?
For the first paper, if we look at the theory paper, there they need a ruler and maybe a pencil and a pen there, I would advise. Mm-hmm. For the map work paper, the following equipment is necessary to write the map work paper. They will need a piece of string, because they will have to do measurements on the map. Right. Maybe there's a question like where they must measure the road or measure a railway line, and they need a piece of string. I think in different schools they use maybe other methods. In some schools, a learner can use a thin chain also to do the measurements. Okay, they need a protractor.
Right.
They need a calculator. They need a ruler and a pencil. And then, in the case of learners that have, sometimes the contours are spaced very closely to each other on the map, or some information isn't maybe clear. And there I would advise a learner to bring magnifying glass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other tips and tricks that you'd like to give to the class of 2011 to help them succeed in geography?
What I would advise them there also, look at the action words. Many learners study the content and they work through question papers, but then sometimes there's something missing also there because our learners cannot interpret the questions properly. There's maybe a question on, say, list the following.
Yeah.
They don't know what the word list means, or justify. They don't know what the word justify means. So my advice even to educators will be that educators must mediate these action words with the learners so that the learners can walk into the question, into the exam and know exactly what is expected from them. Especially our second language learners have a huge problem. We must remember English is their second or third language, and here they come in to the exam room or look at the question paper and there's words like justify, label, account for. So if the educator do not expose the learner to these words, how will the learner know what to do in the exams?
Are these words that are used repeatedly year after year?
Yes, it's used repeatedly.
So if a learner finds them going through a past paper exam, your advice would be go to your teacher, ask them, what does this word mean?
Yes, the learner can go to the teacher and ask them the meaning of the word, but the educator, the teacher must also very early in the year expose the learners in tests, in exams, small tests, informal tests, formal testing. Expose them as much as possible to these words. Then I also want to focus on some of the mistakes that learners make in the exam, Dylan, so that they can avoid this type of things. Learners do not read the instructions. On the first page, there's some instructions there that tell them what they must do, how many questions they must answer, and they don't do that. And that is where we find the answer for all 4 questions, and they lose marks because, like I said earlier on, the best question might be eliminated.
Right.
Okay, and then the next one, learners do not manage their time well. They spend too much time, maybe 1.5 hours on question 1, and then they won't be able to finish their question paper. Then learners misinterpret questions. They don't understand the question, but that comes back to the action words also. And then learners do not make use of the sources given to them. There's diagrams, there's extracts, there's cartoons. They think the cartoon is maybe just there for fun, but it serves a purpose there.
So look at that information because it's there for a reason.
It's there for a reason.
Right.
Okay, Dylan, another thing that I would like to add is that learners must highlight certain words on the diagrams because that can help them in answering the questions. And also when they read the questions, they must underline certain key words because sometimes we find that it's quite long questions. And by the time when they get to the end of the question, they forgot the first part of the question. So it would help them to underline keywords in the question, and that will guide them. Then also the other thing is they must look at the mark allocation of each question. In the geography paper, we find that learners can be led by the mark allocation. For instance, if a learner don't know how many facts to write there, they look at the mark allocation, and if it's say, for instance, 3 times 2 marks, then they know there must be 3 facts or 3 points. So I would suggest they do that.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time and for your invaluable insights. And I hope that has been useful and helpful to you, and that you've got all the information that you need to do the best that you can possibly do in Geography Paper 1 and 2. Until then, cheers.